My dad is a fortune teller. He broke up Julian and his girlfriend because he predicted she was a black widow who would bring him ruin. Julian held a grudge, hid who he was, and came after me. On our anniversary, he entered a nude portrait of me in a national art competition. The shock of it gave my dad a massive stroke. At the hospital entrance, Julian stood with his arm around his first love, his eyes as cold as steel. You didn't really think I liked you, did you? If it weren't for your con artist of a father, Mandy and I would have been married years ago. Your dad's just paralyzed. He's lucky to be alive. He doesn't know my dad's predictions are always right. His ex-girlfriend's birth chart has a once-in-a-century black widow curse. Once they marry, the best-case scenario is financial ruin. The worst case, it wipes out his entire family. And I'm going to make sure that wedding happens. I'll personally send them on their way. I clutched the medical report, my mind a complete blank as I sat in the hospital corridor. The doctor said the stroke was severe. Dad would never speak or walk again. He's only in his early 50s, in the prime of his life. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing in my purse. Numbly, I pulled it out but couldn't remember the passcode. After 2 failed attempts, my trembling hands finally unlocked it. My phone was flooded with messages. I glanced at them, and a wave of heat rushed to my head. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, a painful reminder that all of this was real. Clara, didn't know you had a body like that. How much for a night? Clara, here's my room key. I'm in town on business, you know what I mean. Those 2 messages were from a high school classmate and a client from work. You have been removed from the family fun group chat. That was from my extended family's chat. Clara, don't come home for the holidays this year. Your grandfather saw the photo yesterday and almost had a heart attack. We're still hiding what happened to your dad from him. That was from my uncle. But the various group chats were the most active. Middle school, high school, college friends. Every single group was sharing my picture. It was the painting Julian had just won the award for. A girl stands in a steamy bathroom, eyes closed and head tilted back, her hair covered in white foam. Countless water droplets roll down her smooth body, tracing curves that make your heart race. The subject is turned slightly, revealing every detail of her body without reservation, including the most private parts. Julian had secretly painted me while I was showering and submitted it to the country's biggest art competition. The painting won first place for its delicate brushwork and bold subject matter. Worse, Julian posted a picture of his winning piece on his social feed. The caption: "Thanks to my model for her generosity and support." I saw his friends flooding the comments. "Damn, Julian, isn't that your girlfriend? Holy crap, Julian, you're a little too generous, man. Julian, does your girlfriend know you painted her like this?" I squinted, trying several times to focus on Julian's reply. What girlfriend? Just a fling. I'd never get serious with a woman that open. I didn't even want to paint her. This girl begged me to let her be a nude model. She's desperate for fame. Why would he say that? He took that photo in secret. I was filled with rage and pain, flashes of my time with Julian playing over and over in my head. Julian was a client at my company. He pursued me relentlessly from the moment we met. An umbrella on rainy days, flowers on sunny ones. He'd bring me late-night snacks when I worked overtime, and even brought me homemade soup when I was on my period. Julian was handsome, wealthy, romantic, and charming. My female co-workers were all so jealous, saying I must have saved the galaxy in a past life to land a boyfriend like him. I thought I was lucky too. I never imagined it was the beginning of a nightmare. It's true what they say. There's no such thing as a free lunch, only traps. Tisk, Clara. Knew I'd find you here. I snapped my head up and met Mandy's cold, mocking gaze. She clung to Julian's arm, her pretty features twisted into a smug, cruel expression. You shameless homewrecker. You stole my boyfriend for a year, and now you're finally getting what you deserve. How ridiculous. I should have realized sooner that Julian and Mandy's relationship was anything but simple. While we were dating, Mandy would constantly find excuses to call Julian away from me. A fever in the middle of the night, or something broken in her apartment. Julian always said she was just a distant cousin, and told me not to overthink it. I ignored her taunts, my eyes locked on Julian. He guiltily looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Julian, why? Why would you do this to me? I never thought you were this kind of person. Julian's lips tightened, his expression shifting from shame to anger. He raised his voice, his sharp eyes flashing with fury. What kind of person am I? Clara, you're the one who wronged me. Everything I did was to get back at you. That's right, you wronged me first. Julian seemed to be trying to convince me, but it was more like he was trying to convince himself. He grew more and more agitated, his voice getting louder. If it wasn't for your dad, Mandy and I would have been married years ago. We wouldn't have wasted all this time. As he screamed, his throat raw, I finally understood the whole story. My dad is a fortune teller. After Julian and Mandy started dating, his mom came to my dad with Mandy's birth chart for a reading. My dad said Mandy's chart had an extremely rare Black Widow curse. If an ordinary man married her, and he had a strong enough chart, she'd curse him with endless bad luck and disaster. If he had a weak chart, she could even curse him to death. And Julian's was the worst possible match. He's a fire sign, but a weak one like a winter flame. Mandy, a raging river of water, would extinguish him. He'd suffer a string of accidents and endure a lot of pain before he died. Julian's mom turned pale as she listened. Before she even left our house, she was on the phone, forcing Julian to break up with Mandy. The Julians were rich and powerful, while Mandy came from a poor family and only went to college with Julian's financial support. His mother had never approved of her. Julian refused to break up, trying to defy his mother. But on this matter, his mom took drastic measures. She cut off all of Julian's credit cards and called every one of his friends, forbidding them from lending him money. Without Julian's help, Mandy couldn't even finish college. She had to drop out in her junior year because she couldn't afford tuition. They had been college sweethearts and had been living together off campus since their sophomore year. Once the money ran out, Julian had to give up their luxury apartment and move back into the dorms. To make ends meet, Mandy had to rent the cheapest place she could find in a rundown part of the city. After 2 years of this hardship, Julian finally learned the value of money. He went home, surrendered to his mother, and started dating a string of other women. But it was all an act for his mother's benefit. The person he truly loved was still Mandy, and they had never lost contact. Such unbreakable love. Mandy's birth chart was so unusual that my dad had even mentioned it to me once. He said that most fortune tellers wouldn't be able to spot the problem. He hadn't wanted to interfere in their relationship, but he couldn't bear to see Julian walk into his own death. My dad was trying to save him. See? Feeling guilty now. Still think you're so innocent? Mandy bit her lip, her eyes welling up with tears. The mascara on her almond-shaped eyes started to run. Do you have any idea what I've been through all these years? Do you know how much it hurt to watch Julian with other women? Mandy grew more agitated, leaning in so close her face was just inches from mine. The distance was far too close. So close that I could reach out and grab a fistful of her long, silky hair. Mandy's shriek echoed through the hospital corridor. It was followed by the sharp crack of a slap. Using all my strength, I yanked her hair and slapped her again and again, each blow landing solidly on her pretty face. Soon, blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, and her fair skin swelled into a purple mess. Clara, you're insane. Let go of Mandy. Julian was completely stunned that I would suddenly attack someone. He only snapped out of it after Mandy had taken several slaps. He was an athlete who worked out regularly, much stronger than me. He twisted my wrist, and the pain forced me to let go. Mandy cowered in Julian's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Sob, Julian, kill her for me. Julian didn't hit me. His expression was complicated. After a long moment, he sighed. Forget it, Clara. We're even now. You can go. Even? My nudes were still all over the internet, and my dad was lying paralyzed in a hospital bed. And he was telling me we were even? Clearly, Mandy didn't agree. Crying, she pounded on Julian's chest. She just beat the hell out of me. How are we even? Julian, are you actually falling for her? You hesitated when I told you to submit the painting, and you didn't want to post it online. I had to do it myself in the end. Tell me, did the act become real? Did you actually fall in love with her? Julian shot me a panicked glance, looking flustered. Mandy, don't be ridiculous. You know you're the only one for me. This is a hospital. I just don't want to make a scene. With that, he half-dragged, half-carried Mandy away, his tall figure looking somewhat defeated from behind. My parents divorced when I was 10, and my mother has her own family now. I had to work and couldn't take care of my dad full-time. Left with no choice, I hired a male caregiver from an agency at a high price. My dad is a tall man, and after his stroke, his daily needs were difficult to manage. He needed to be bathed and cleaned every day, and an average female caregiver wouldn't have been strong enough to move him. Even with the help of 2 young nurses, changing his bed sheets at the hospital left me drenched in sweat. I juggled my job with taking care of my dad. At the same time, I found a lawyer to sue Julian, but the lawyer advised against escalating things. He said that filing a lawsuit would just be pouring fuel on the fire, and my photos would spread online at an even faster rate. Besides, the evidence was stacked against me. Mandy had posted screenshots on her blog. They were of a chat history between Julian and me, where I supposedly begged him to use my photos in the competition, saying I wanted to be famous. It also said I was proud of my body and wasn't afraid of people seeing it. The lawyer said Julian must have used my phone when I wasn't looking, sent the messages, and then deleted them from my device. And I had no way to prove whether I sent them myself or if someone else had used my phone. He said there was nothing I could do but silently accept it. But I couldn't. That refusal intensified every time I looked at my dad's stiff face and his pained eyes. One day, the caregiver had the day off, and I tried to help my dad change his pants. He gripped the waistband tightly with his one good hand, his left, and made urgent, desperate "ah" sounds. My dad had been a proud man his whole life. I knew what he was trying to hold on to was the last shred of his dignity. In the end, I had to ask a neighbor, an older man, to help me change the pants. And that was when I made up my mind. I would do whatever it took to make Julian and Mandy pay. I just never expected Mandy to make the first move against me again. I came home from work one day to find that our usual caregiver had been replaced. This was a man in his 40s. He was tall and powerfully built, with dark skin. His features were harsh, especially his thick, dark eyebrows that nearly met in the middle. No exaggeration, one glare from him could make a child burst into tears. When he saw me, he raised an eyebrow, a predatory glint in his eyes. Like a wolf spotting its prey. "You must be Miss Song. I'm Ben's cousin. He wasn't feeling well, so he asked me to cover for him for a day." Ben was my dad's caregiver. I pretended to be calm, nodding a greeting as I subtly backed toward the door. When I was very young, I'd shown a surprising talent for the mystical arts. For most people, the arcane arts of divination, the celestial stems, the earthly branches, the complex interactions of cosmic forces were impossible to grasp. But for me, it was as easy as breathing. My dad was thrilled, always saying his legacy would be passed on. My mom, however, was vehemently opposed. She thought my dad was a charlatan. She didn't want her daughter to become one too. She wanted me to go to a good university, find a respectable, stable job, get married, have children, and live a quiet, happy life. My dad agreed on the surface but secretly taught me the 4 pillars of destiny, I Ching divination, and purple star astrology. When my mom found out, they had a massive fight that ended in divorce. After the divorce, my dad was filled with regret and stopped teaching me, focusing instead on my conventional studies. But he didn't realize that once you learn something like that, you can never forget it. This man in front of me, his eyes showed white all around the iris, a vein pulsed on his temple, and he had the narrow, pointed face of a career criminal. How could a man like that possibly be a caregiver? The man was extremely alert. I had only taken 2 steps back when he noticed my intention. He strode forward, blocking the door, and gave me a triumphant smirk. "Miss Song, you just got home. Leaving so soon?" I lifted my chin, trying to stay calm. "What did you do to my dad?" The man sneered, revealing a set of yellowed teeth. "He's a paralytic. What do you think I could do to him?" "Don't worry. My target isn't your dad." As he spoke, he reached out to grab my arm. He was overly confident in his own strength. Subduing a skinny girl like me seemed like child's play to him. His movements were lazy, his eyes lingering on my chest as he reached for me. Seizing the opportunity, I lifted my foot and kicked him hard in the crotch. I was wearing pointed-toe leather shoes for an important meeting at work that day. Arg! The man howled and clutched his groin, his face contorting in agony. He was leaning against the door, so I had to turn and run for the bedroom. Bang! I slammed the bedroom door shut, locked it, and then dragged a nearby armchair to barricade it. Only after all that did I collapse onto the sofa, finally letting out a breath. Ah! I looked up and realized I had run into my dad's room. He was propped up in bed, looking at me with terror and worry. The windows were closed, and the room had a faint smell of urine. A wave of sorrow washed over me, and my eyes reddened. Dad, I'm okay. Don't worry. In my rush, I'd left my phone and purse on the console table by the entrance. Luckily, my dad's phone was by his bed. I grabbed it and quickly called the police. Thump. Thump, thump, thump. The solid wood door groaned under the violent blows. We lived in an old apartment complex. Though our unit had been renovated, the soundproofing was terrible. As the door started to splinter, I leaned halfway out the window and screamed down to the street below. Help! There's a killer in apartment 1102 on the 4th floor. It was only a little after 9 p.m., and most of the neighbors were still awake, some watching TV, others helping their kids with homework. We didn't live on a high floor, and my screams quickly alerted people walking below and in other buildings. Hearing my cries, the banging on the door grew even more frantic. My dad was terrified for me. His eyes were bloodshot, and he let out guttural roars like a cornered animal. He knew I was in danger and struggled to get out of bed to help, but he could barely lift his hand. The strain made the muscles in his face twitch uncontrollably, making his facial droop even more pronounced. The doctor had warned me not to let my dad get too agitated, or he could have another stroke. Bitch, just wait till I get my hands on you. The man at the door kicked it a few more times. Realizing he'd made too much of a scene, he finally gave up and left. Before he did, he smashed our TV. He also grabbed my purse, which had my phone and wallet inside. My wallet contained all my bank cards and my ID. Luckily, my call to the police had been timely. A few neighbors were standing in the hallway, watching the commotion. While none of them tried to stop him, they were helpful enough to point the police in the right direction. The man was quickly arrested and taken to the police station. The police said he was a regular in the prison system, with a long rap sheet for fighting, extortion, and burglary. During the interrogation, he acted like a total degenerate. I just saw she was pretty and wanted to sleep with her. It's just attempted rape. How long can I get for that? By the time I left the police station, the sun was rising. I rushed to the hospital and ran right into the doctor on his morning rounds. As I'd feared, after the night's ordeal, my dad's condition had worsened. I held his dry, thin hand, a tide of hatred rising within me. That man knew everything about my life, where I worked, my schedule. He even knew the restaurants I frequented. Only Julian and Mandy knew all that. My dad always taught me that those who study feng shui and fortune-telling must never use these arts to harm others. But this would just be self-defense, right? I moved my dad to a nursing home in the next city over, and began preparing my revenge. Mandy's birth chart was a vast ocean of water. A force like that can only be guided, never opposed. So whenever she encounters the earth element, she runs into bad luck. That earth could be an object, a place's feng shui, or a person. Julian owned a large, single-story luxury apartment downtown where he and Mandy lived. Mandy, of course, didn't do housework, but Julian disliked having strangers in his home. Their cleaning lady came in the morning and left in the evening, the same as his work schedule. I staked out their building for 2 days and quickly figured out the cleaner's routine. Julian had 2 cleaners. One of them, a Mrs. Chun, was short, stout, and had a very solid-looking build. After casually asking for her birthday, I confirmed it. She was an earth person. No wonder she was always complaining that the lady of the house was constantly finding fault with her, always nitpicking and trying to get her replaced. The cleaner earned $300 a day working at Julian's. I pretended to be looking for work and offered to help her out for just $150 a day. Although she hesitated, the lure of extra money was too strong. After watching me for a few days, she brought me into Julian's home. She told the other cleaner, Linda, that I was her niece, just helping out for a couple of days. After graduating, Julian had started working at his family's company and had gotten Mandy a job there, too. So during the day, it was just me and Linda in the apartment. She was responsible for the kitchen, bathrooms, living room, and cooking dinner. I handled the bedrooms, the study, guest rooms, and the balcony. Julian was a neat freak. The house had to be spotless, without a single watermark on any glass surface. Even the decorative trinkets on the shelves had to be wiped clean. Linda and I spent most of our time working, with little time for idle chat. After a few days, Mrs. Chun was very pleased with my work. At first, she would come by an hour before quitting time to inspect everything I had done. After a week, she only did occasional spot checks. This month, she took on another client and hadn't been to Julian's in over 10 days. Slowly, I began to subtly rearrange the furniture and decor in the apartment. Mandy loved fresh flowers and brought home a new bouquet almost every day. Vases of all colors filled the study, the bedroom, and the coffee table, adding a touch of softness to the home's otherwise cold modern decor. But she didn't know that you can't just place flowers anywhere in a house. If you put fresh flowers in the romance corner, it can trigger a curse of infidelity. This curse amplifies temptation for both partners, making it easy for a third party to enter the picture. It also fosters suspicion and conflict between the couple. In addition, I slid a 3-inch long brass sword under their mattress. You should never have sharp objects in the bedroom. The pointed shape attracts negative energy. The sword was engraved with a specific hexagram, with the hilt pointed at Mandy and the tip at Julian. Metal feeds water, and water extinguishes fire. Combined with Mandy's water-dominant chart, Julian would start to feel suffocated by their relationship. Just being with Mandy would make him feel increasingly uncomfortable. Julian, what took you so long to get home? Mandy sat on the sofa in the dark, arms crossed, her face darker than the night sky. I had already installed hidden cameras all over their apartment. Right now, I was slurping a bowl of noodles, my eyes glued to the computer screen. Hearing Mandy, Julian yanked impatiently at his collar. Mandy, are you on your period or something? The old Mandy would never have been like this. She was always gentle and sweet with Julian. After all, Julian wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her meal ticket. He paid for her food, her clothes, her education. From the very beginning, their relationship had been unequal. But the Mandy of today had a much stronger backbone. Because she was pregnant. I had poked holes in all the condoms in their nightstand. Being young and healthy, it didn't take long for them to conceive. I took a sip of the savory noodle soup and let out a contented sigh. On a cold, rainy day, sitting on a warm sofa watching two people you despise argue what could be better, Julian didn't know Mandy was pregnant yet. He only felt that she was becoming more and more unbearable, acting like a complete shrew. If you're so bored, you should read more. You have the least education in your department. I'll sign you up for an MBA program. You should go take some classes. Mandy's face darkened, and she let out a cold laugh. You're sending me off to school so you'll have time to meet up with your lover, is that it? Julian was stunned. He couldn't help but wonder if this sharp-tongued, bitter woman was really the same gentle, lovely girl he had put on a pedestal. I'm exhausted today. I don't have time for your crazy act. Julian kicked off his shoes and threw his bag onto the console table. I'm sleeping in the study tonight. At that, Mandy could no longer contain her anger. She shot up from the sofa and ran to Julian, losing a slipper along the way. Julian, have you been cheating on me? You better explain yourself. Mandy grabbed the collar of Julian's shirt and sneezed from the strong scent of perfume on him. Then she saw it. A conspicuous lipstick mark on his gray collar. I had paid someone to put that lipstick mark there. Mandy herself hadn't realized how increasingly irritable she'd become lately. Part of it was likely pregnancy hormones. But there was another important reason. I had put something under her pillow. Julian was a man who valued his dignity. Dignified people don't like to scream and shout when they argue. Whenever we had a disagreement, Julian would always resort to the silent treatment. This time was no different. He ignored Mandy's hysterics, giving her only a cold, indifferent glance, as if she were a puff of air. After Julian went to his room, Mandy sat numbly on the sofa, hugging her knees. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights twinkled like a galaxy. Human greed is endless. At first, Mandy was happy just to be Julian's girlfriend. But now she wanted to be Mrs. Julian. She wanted the family's immense wealth. And she wanted Julian's undivided love, for his eyes and heart to be only for her. Mandy looked down, placing a hand on her flat stomach. With this child, anything was possible. Mandy turned to look out at the city, and through the screen, I watched her. My home didn't have a glamorous city view or luxurious decor. But that was okay. I would drag them both down to hell with me. The infidelity curse I'd set up in Julian's home wasn't just for one person's temptation. To get my revenge, I had quit my job. During the day, I worked as a cleaner at Julian's. At night, I took on various part-time gigs. One evening, I got a designated driver request. When I arrived at the upscale hotel, I realized the client was Julian. He shook his head and blinked hard, looking a bit dazed. "Clara? Is that you?" The smell of alcohol mixed with the cool scent of his cologne washed over me. I frowned and took a step back. I really should have checked my horoscope today. It really is you. When did you start working as a driver? Julian ran a long finger over his brow, his eyes dark as he scanned me from head to toe. His gaze finally settled on my blue work vest. "You quit your job? You've lost so much weight." There was definitely something wrong with this guy. But it was only 9 p.m., and we were in a busy part of the city, so I wasn't worried about him trying anything. "Could you please cancel the ride? I don't want to take your order." Julian looked hurt, like a sad puppy. "Clara, do you hate me that much?" I almost laughed out loud. Had Mandy's curse finally fried his brain? Seeing me turn to leave, Julian panicked. He stepped forward, grabbed my arm, and pulled me into his arms. "Clara, don't go. I've missed you so much." The familiar scent of his cologne filled my nose. I had given him that bottle of cologne for his birthday. The smell used to make my heart flutter. Now it just made me sick. I lifted my foot and stomped hard on his toes. He grunted and stumbled back, meeting my furious, hateful glare. "Miss me? You mean you miss trying to kill me? Was it a big disappointment that the guy you sent to my house last time didn't finish the job? Julian, are you trying to pull the same trick again? Fool me twice." Julian hopped around in pain, but my words stopped him cold. "Sent someone to your house? When did I ever send someone to your house?" After I told him what happened, Julian sobered up instantly. He stared at me, his dark eyes unreadable. "Clara, I did paint that picture. But I only painted it for my private collection. I never submitted it to the art competition. And I didn't post any of that stuff online. I never sent anyone to your house. I hated your dad, but I never actually wanted to hurt you." I didn't say anything, just tilted my head back and stared into his eyes. Julian had beautiful eyes. Long dark lashes, a slight upward tilt at the corners, and irises so dark they were like stars against the whites. My dad used to say that people with clear eyes can't be all bad. That's why I had thrown myself at him like a moth to a flame, never imagining he would betray me so completely. I finally understood that sometimes, being stupid is its own kind of evil. Julian hadn't directly harmed me, but he was weak-willed, and his indulgence and trust in Mandy were bottomless. Every knife Mandy had plunged into me was one he had handed her. At that thought, a cold smile touched my lips. My dad's condition has gotten worse. He's practically a vegetable now. He eats, sleeps, and shits in a bed. He'll probably spend the rest of his life like that. My relatives have disowned me, and I was fired from my job. Julian, you lost 3 years of a relationship, but my dad lost his health. And me? I've lost everything. Julian's lips moved for a long time before he managed a mosquito-like whisper. I never thought it would turn out like this. Normally, I wouldn't have wasted my breath talking to Julian. But I had a feeling he was telling the truth. He hadn't been the one to submit the painting or post those things online. Julian was too arrogant and self-righteous for that. He wouldn't be the type to do something and not admit it. If Mandy could use his weakness, so could I. Clara. As I started to leave, Julian reached out and grabbed my wrist. I was about to shake him off when I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure in my peripheral vision. It was Mandy. She was hiding behind a large decorative vase near the hotel entrance, peering out at me with a dark, gloomy expression. Her mistrust of Julian had recently escalated to the point of stalking. I pretended to twist my ankle and fell into Julian's arms. "I'll kill you, you shameless fox." Unable to control herself any longer, Mandy rushed forward, her hand raised to slap me. Julian quickly intercepted her, his handsome face a mask of anger and shock. "Didn't you say you were staying at your parents' house tonight? What are you doing here?" Then a beat later, realization dawned, and his face flushed red. "You lied to me." "Not only did you lie, you followed me." Mandy didn't even look at him, her venomous gaze fixed on me. "Clara, you just don't give up, do you? What, now that you're broke and unemployed, you're trying to seduce Julian again?" "Let me tell you, not a chance. If you come near Julian again, I swear I'll have you killed." Julian shot me an apologetic look, then grabbed Mandy with one hand and pushed through the gathering crowd with the other. "We'll talk about this at home. Don't make a scene on the street." He cared more about his image than anything. Mandy's shouting had already drawn a crowd of onlookers. People were pointing at us, and I could hear whispers of catching a mistress and cheating. As soon as Julian and Mandy left, I clocked out and went home. On the security camera footage, their luxury apartment was a disaster. The floor was littered with shattered porcelain and glass. The once beautiful flowers were strewn about, their petals crushed and scattered. A perfect metaphor for their fragile relationship. Julian and Mandy began a long period of Cold War. Mandy often stayed up all night, hugging her knees and staring out the window. I understood why she hadn't told Julian she was pregnant. She had probably wanted to surprise him, but now she was afraid. She was already doubting his feelings for her. If Julian didn't want the baby, she would lose her last bargaining chip and her chance to marry into his wealthy family. Mandy was consumed by a misery she couldn't share, curled up by the window like a wounded puppy. It was the perfect time to strike. Leo was the man I had carefully selected for her. He was one of Mandy's high school classmates, handsome, with a silver tongue. I'd heard they even had a little crush on each other back then. Most importantly, Leo was drowning in gambling debt. Through a few friends, I made sure Leo learned about Mandy's current situation. Leo was very interested in his old classmate who was about to marry into a fortune. Mandy's fingers flew across her phone screen, and the ugly expression on her face gradually softened. Just then, my own phone buzzed with a notification. I looked down. It was from Julian. By my count, this was the third time I had blocked him. He was certainly persistent. "Clara, don't mind Mandy. She's still young and immature. I promise she won't have anyone bother you again. If you run into any trouble, you can tell me. I'll help in any way I can." His words were as empty as his promises. This couple was something else. When their families disapproved, they acted like it was them against the world, fighting for their love. Now that they were living together, they were already sleeping in the same bed but dreaming different dreams. I wondered which one of them would cheat first. I had put a lot of effort into strengthening the infidelity curse. I glanced down and replied with a simple K, then tossed my phone aside. Mandy was now holding her phone, a silly, lovesick smile on her face. She bit her lip, then suddenly stood up and went back to her room. Then, she started rummaging through her closet, looking for something to wear. It was past midnight. I had no idea what she was up to. Mandy changed into a tight-fitting, hip-hugging dress. She stood in front of the mirror, discontentedly touching her flat stomach. Women with the Black Widow curse are naturally restless. Their emotional and physical needs are much stronger than the average person's. They constantly need someone by their side. In modern terms, they're born romantics who can't live without a man. Julian's cold shoulder over the past few days had pushed Mandy's patience to its breaking point. I just needed to give her one more push. I had a private account on X. Not even Julian knew about it, but Mandy did. I used to share sweet stories about my relationship with Julian on that account. An account with a blacked-out profile picture would visit my page every single day. Thinking back, it must have been Mandy. She was like a snake hiding in the shadows, venomously spying on my life. Every post I made fueled her hatred for me. Well, let's make that hatred even stronger. And it shouldn't just be for me. Julian had to be included. I took a screenshot of Julian's recent messages, paired it with a slightly sad-looking photo, and posted it with the caption, "Should I forgive him?" Mandy didn't see the post until the next day. When she did, she flew into a rage in her bedroom. She picked up her makeup, ready to smash it, but then looked at the logos and silently put it down. Finally, unable to contain her anger, she shattered a few vases. During her rampage, she tried calling Julian repeatedly, but he declined every call. After more than 10 minutes of relentless calling, Julian finally blocked her number. If I were her, I'd be furious too. Julian was giving her the silent treatment while shamelessly trying to add me back again and again. I blocked Julian. Julian blocked her. The proud and arrogant Mandy couldn't take that kind of humiliation. She cleaned up her room and changed into a black dress. The neckline was cut low, accentuating her seductive figure and sultry eyes. After applying a flawless makeup look, Mandy grabbed her purse and walked out the door. That night, neither Mandy nor Julian came home. When Mandy returned the next day, her face glowing with satisfaction, I was a little speechless. This woman seemed to have forgotten she was pregnant. After a few days of dates, Mandy's mood improved significantly. The next time Julian messaged me, I told him I wanted to go to the next city over to watch the sunrise and clear my head. Julian immediately offered to go with me, saying he could be my driver and help me set up a tent. He told Mandy a casual lie about a 2-day business trip. When he saw me again, Julian seemed nervous. He handed me a cup of milk tea, then fidgeted, running a hand through his hair and straightening his clothes. "Clara, does this mean you've forgiven me?" I looked at him with a half-smile, wondering again why I had ever liked a man like this. Perhaps in his and Mandy's eyes, nothing in the world was more important than love. My dad's illness, my nude photos, none of it mattered. As long as he was nice to me, there was still a chance I would fall for him again. I suspected he was secretly reading toxic alpha male romance novels at work and had rotted his brain. The kind where no matter how horribly the male lead treats the female lead, even if he kills her whole family, she always forgives him. Unfortunately, real life isn't a novel. I got into the car with a blank expression, not even giving him a glance. But Julian was happy, chatting nonstop the whole way. From the weather to movies, from poetry to the meaning of life. "Clara, I'm so happy you agreed to come out with me." He was celebrating too soon, because I glanced at my phone and saw that Mandy, bold as brass, had brought Leo back to their apartment. "I'm not feeling well. I don't want to go hiking anymore. Can you take me home?" Julian turned to me stunned. "But we're already out of the city." My face was cold. "Pull over. I want to go home." Julian looked frustrated but turned the car around and drove me home. As I got out, he looked at me wistfully. "What's wrong? Do you want me to take you to the hospital?" I waved him away like he was a fly. "No, I just need to sleep it off." "You should get going." To make sure he went straight home instead of to the office to work late, I accidentally spilled my milk tea on his pants. "Hurry home and catch your cheating girlfriend. If you go now, you can still catch a free live show." Julian left, looking back 3 times with every step. I rushed upstairs, changed into comfortable pajamas, and glued my eyes to the computer screen. Time seemed to crawl by. As I waited anxiously, the door to Julian's apartment finally opened. By this time, Mandy and Leo had taken a short break and were already starting round 2. They had moved their activities from the bedroom to the living room sofa. Julian pushed the door open and came face to face with a flushed and passionate Mandy. At that moment, she was straddling Leo, her cries wild and unrestrained. Wow, what a spectacular scene. I was a little sad I wasn't there in person, stuck watching the live stream from my room. Julian froze in the doorway, as if someone had cast a spell on him. Disbelief, shock, suspicion, confusion, rage. I had never seen so many emotions on one person's face. "Quick, let me down." Mandy scrambled off Leo in a panic and ran naked toward Julian. "Julian, let me explain." I had to admire her. In a situation like this, what was there to explain? Julian slapped her across the face. "Get away from me." Leo stood up from the sofa, awkwardly using a throw pillow to cover himself. "Sorry about this, man." I almost burst out laughing. This guy was one of a kind. Right, he's a delivery guy. He forced me. Ignoring the sting in her cheek, Mandy quickly got up from the floor and grabbed Julian's hand. Leo bent down to pick up his clothes from the floor, looking annoyed. What delivery? I'm not even wearing a uniform. Julian slapped Mandy again, this time on the other side of her face, making the swelling on both cheeks symmetrical. Mandy, do you take me for a fool? Get your filthy hands off me. Unlike other men who would have rushed over to fight Leo, Julian just gave Mandy a deep, hard look and turned to leave. I was deeply disappointed. Seriously, was he even a man? She cheated on him so blatantly, and he was just going to walk away. As Julian turned, Mandy gritted her teeth, grabbed a vase from the entryway console, and smashed it against the back of his head. Both Leo and I were shocked. By the time we snapped out of it, Julian was unconscious on the floor, blood pouring from the back of his head. What are you standing there for? Help me. Mandy's face was cold as she bent down to drag Julian, trying to pull him back into the apartment. Julian's apartment was the only one on the floor, so they didn't have to worry about being seen. Leo frantically pulled on his pants, grabbed his clothes, and made a break for it. Holy shit, you're insane. I was just here for a hookup, not to be an accessory to murder. Mandy sneered and suddenly threw the vase at Leo. Leo caught it out of reflex. When he realized what he'd done, his face turned pale. Your fingerprints are all over that vase now. I'll just say you were the one who hit him. You think you can just walk away from this? You know who he is, right? He's the sole heir to the Julian family fortune. You really think you can cross his family and get away with it? Leo, we're in the same boat now. If I go down, you're coming with me. Leo's face grew paler and paler until it was as white as a sheet. He bit his lip and cursed under his breath. Fuck. This is the unluckiest day of my life. He hunched over and dragged Julian back into the room while Mandy rolled up the rug from the entryway and threw it inside. The white wool rug was stained with huge patches of bright red blood, a horrifying sight. That's a huge gash on the back of his head. We have to stop the bleeding, right? Leo was panicking. He grabbed a piece of clothing and pressed it against the wound. Do you have a first aid kit? Any bandages or anything? Mandy was still naked, silent, just standing there, her almond-shaped eyes fixed on Julian. When Julian wakes up, he'll definitely break up with me. Not only will he break up with me, he'll take back everything he ever gave me. She looked down, her hand on her smooth, flat stomach. But if Julian dies? Then the baby in my belly will be the sole heir to the Julian family fortune. Leo collapsed onto the floor, his eyes nearly popping out of his head. Holy shit. You're pregnant and you were sleeping with me? Wait, you actually want to kill him? I'm out. You're a complete psycho. Mandy suddenly smiled and bent down, extending a hand to Leo. $3 million. When I have this baby and become the heir, I'll give you $3 million. The words $3 million seemed to have a magical effect, freezing Leo in place as he was about to run. His pupils dilated, and he wiped his face fiercely. Make it $5 million. This is the Julian family we're talking about. They quickly reached an agreement, and even started discussing how to dispose of Julian's body. I sat stunned in front of my computer, torn. Julian probably wasn't dead yet, just unconscious. But he was still bleeding from the back of his head. If this continued, he would soon die from blood loss. Was I really going to just sit here and watch him die? Just as I was hesitating, Julian woke up. He let out a low groan and staggered to his feet, clutching his head. Mandy and Leo were terrified. Mandy was the first to react, screaming at Leo. Grab him. Don't let him get away. Julian had lost a lot of blood and was dizzy. But he quickly understood the situation, and a wave of fear and fury washed over him. Leo lunged at him, and the two of them started wrestling on the floor. Julian was much stronger than Leo. Although his vision was blackening from blood loss, a powerful survival instinct sent a surge of adrenaline through him, giving him superhuman strength. Leo, you useless piece of crap. Do you want your money or not? Mandy stood nearby, clutching a vase, her face etched with anxiety. She wanted to hit Julian but was afraid of hitting Leo. Whatever Mandy's offering, I'll double it. 10 million? 20 million? I'll give you 30 million. Julian was every bit the rich kid, throwing out huge numbers without a second thought. The staggering figure of 30 million made Leo's grip slacken. Seizing the opportunity, Julian threw him off and scrambled for the door. Seeing her chance slip away, Mandy raised the vase and brought it down hard on Julian's lower back. Julian collapsed to the floor. Mandy knelt beside him and began smashing the vase repeatedly against his back. She didn't even notice when the shattered porcelain cut her fingers. Things had spun completely out of my control. After a moment's thought, I hung up the call I was about to make to building security. If Julian could get out, it was his fate. If he died here, that was his fate too. He had no one to blame but himself. Click. Just then, the front door opened. Linda, the other cleaner, stood in the doorway holding her purse. Seeing the scene inside, she screamed, dropped her bag, and ran. It seemed Julian wasn't fated to die today. After finishing her work earlier, Linda had gone home only to realize she'd left something behind. Half an hour ago, she had texted Julian to ask if it was a convenient time to come back and get it. After getting his okay, she had her son drive her back to the complex. She never expected to walk in and save Julian's life. Mandy frantically tried to chase after her, but Julian grabbed her ankle with a death grip. Seeing that things had gone south, Leo grabbed his phone and bolted. He didn't get far before running into the building's security guards, who had heard the commotion. He immediately changed his tune. "Julian's in there. Follow me. Hurry up, call an ambulance." The guy had some nerve, trying to play the hero to save his own skin. Once Mandy was restrained, Leo immediately crouched down next to Julian and snitched. "Mandy's pregnant with your baby." She was planning to use the kid to control everything. Julian's eyes darkened. He opened his mouth to say something but couldn't hold on and passed out. The apartment was a flurry of activity, with police, paramedics, and building staff coming and going. Julian was carried out on a stretcher. The paramedics were extremely careful as they moved him. I could hear a muffled voice from the camera, something about Julian's lumbar spine being injured. After that day, I didn't see Julian again. The next time I saw him was at the nursing home. My dad's condition had improved a lot. I was pushing him in his wheelchair for a walk around the grounds when I unexpectedly ran into Julian. He had lost a lot of weight and was sitting pale-faced in a wheelchair. His eyes were sunken and his cheekbones jutted out, making him look almost like a drug addict. Julian obviously saw me too. He froze, then quickly turned his head and wheeled himself away as fast as he could. The caregiver with him was shocked and ran after him, shouting, "Mr. Julian, slow down." I had heard a few things about what happened to Julian. Mandy had lost the baby. She was convicted of attempted murder and aggravated assault, resulting in a 10-year prison sentence. Julian's spine was injured, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. He would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, in a worse condition than my dad. My dad had a stroke, so there was still a chance of recovery. For Julian, there was none. The Julian family hated Mandy with a vengeance. I heard her life in prison was miserable, that she was beaten every day. Julian's mother had sworn to make her suffer for the rest of her life. As for Julian, with his family's resources, he should have been recovering at home. Why was he at this nursing home? I shook my head. It didn't matter. Julian was in my past. He and Mandy had both gotten what they deserved. One disabled, the other in prison, their lives ruined while they were still young. But I didn't feel a shred of pity. They had brought it all on themselves. I never expected that even though I didn't seek him out, Julian would come looking for me. "Clara, your dad, is he doing okay?" Julian called out to me and shoved a bank card into my hand. This is compensation for your father. The pin is your birthday. Your dad was right. Being with Mandy was going to kill me. It's just a shame I realized it too late. Clara, I'm so sorry. I took the bank card without hesitation. It must be nice to be rich. Even as a disabled person, you're still a rich disabled person. For the sake of the money, I patiently sat with Julian for a while. The nursing home grounds were beautiful. There was a large lake on the east side of the property, lined with willow trees. The branches swayed in the breeze, bringing a touch of spring life to the air. I didn't want to stay at home. Julian stared blankly at the sparkling surface of the lake, as if he were seeing something else through the water. My mom is always looking at me, wanting to say something but holding back. She knows about what happened with Mandy. She can't bring herself to blame me, so she just walks around with this sad look on her face. It's hard to be around. So I found this nursing home. It's an ordinary place, so I wouldn't run into anyone I know. I never thought I'd run into you. I was yawning. I had worked late the night before and was exhausted. That's $6 million. $3 million is compensation for your dad, and the other $3 million is my apology to you. My sleepiness vanished instantly. My eyes shot wide open. $6 million. Okay. I could finally retire early. Julian rambled on for a while longer. By the time he was done talking, some life had returned to his numb expression. The sun's about to set. Let me wheel you back to your room. I pushed Julian along the lakeside path, my heart filled with dreams for the future. The doctor said my dad's condition had improved greatly, and he could be discharged in another month. He could already walk slowly with the help of a cane. With proper rehabilitation, he could regain 40 to 50% of his function in a few years. The sun was gradually setting, but tomorrow would still be a brand new day.